Water. It's the basic building block of life. The Earth's leading fuel product, water, becoming the leading source for energy, and our attention is turned away from fossil fuels. Dutchman Industries and corporate partner Extreme Energy Solutions has found a way to bring water gas, or HHO, into the fuel mix, scoring significant fuel economy savings. This video will provide you with a first-hand look at the product and the process. The CEO of Extreme Energy Solutions is Samuel Burlum.
HAFC vaporizer, which is your callus, and it comes with all your necessary fuel fittings. The reservoir holds your new fuel source, your distilled water. And finally, the HAFC fuel cell. And that is your onboard hydrogen generator, included with all the necessary components to hook it up to your electric system. So as a kit, when a customer orders it, it comes in the mail. It's neatly packaged with everything that they need in order to take it to a certified installer. They should not attempt to put this in themselves due to the parameters in which they need to properly tune the vehicle, and having the understanding about sensors, wire diagrams, what have you. They should not attempt to do this themselves. And the kit is neatly packaged for the installer to have everything they need to make this adaptable to the vehicles in which they are applying this to. So you get all your electrical wiring, you have all your hoses, clamps, you have your fuel line. As part of the kit, as we explained before, is the pulverizer, your fuel additive, your optimizer, which is your master brain computer. We have done already to the vehicle is we've placed the initial fuel cell behind the radiators so that we have the proper support area that's tamper-proof by your regular consumer or vehicle service agent. When you get your vehicle taken to, say, a place to get an oil change or a dealer to get your regular maintenance taken care of, this allows us no manipulation to the vehicle with the conditions that we now set in the engine. So the fuel cell is now tamper-proof, and the only way that they can get to is by tearing apart the front end, which they have no reason to, unless, of course, you're in an accident. So the fuel cell's been placed behind the radiator, behind the shroud here, with your front grille. We then run your reservoir at a higher area because the system's gravity fed. And in here there's a solenoid that actually shuts off and on as you need your liquid into the fuel cell. The fuel cell then will generate, during its electrolysis process, a monatomic oxygen, monatomic hydrogen, which in all said and done is actually HHO water gas, taken into a atom by atom form. Once the material is made and split up they'll feed back up into the reservoir, and this hose here comes from the fuel cell into the reservoir. This hose allows the hydrogen to rise to the top of the reservoir and feed into your air intake system. Then the monatomic oxygen, monatomic hydrogen will then mix with your current conditions, your air intake, and mix with your fuel and your intake manifold. That's step one of what we've done. Step two of what we've done is we have taken the fuel rail, your fuel delivery system, and we've changed the parameters in which it's going to work. What we did was we basically took a heat exchanger, what we call the vaporizer, which is nothing more than a magnetic callus, which we place on a heat source so it can keep heat in and allow contaminants out. And we place that on a radiator hose or a heater hose. We wrap it with tin foil and heater tape to get the maximum potential out of that particular device. We hook up into your fuel coming in from your gas tank, run it through this particular device, which will heat and ionize the fuel and allow it to go back into your fuel rail, into fuel intake on the engine. That's step 2. Step 3, the third part of the kit, is actually a fuel additive, which is a fuel additive called Culvalizer, HAFC Culvalizer. Many people are under the perception that this is just simply something off the shelf at your auto parts store, and it is not. It is a special blend of material. Can't tell you what it is due to patent rights, but what it does do is it breaks down the coherent bonds of the fuel, allows it to stretch out the fuel, allow for the vaporizer to tear apart the atoms and elements a little bit further. So you're stretching the fuel, you're heating it, and allowing the car to be able to break down the fuel in a way that it will actually become more vapor than it will liquid. It actually helps by taking all the garbage additives that the oil companies put into the fuel to give you less mileage. This actually works against what they do to give you maximum mileage. This alone can give you between 3 and 5 more miles to the gallon just by manipulating the fuel itself. So what we do is we add 1 ounce to every 25 gallons of gas, because it's very potent material, and that will allow that process to take place. That is also one part of the kit. That's step 3. Step 4 is hooking up the optimizer, which is simply the brains of the operation in your car as part of the HAFC kit. The optimizer allows us to manipulate sensor controls to tell the computer that it's at normal settings while we're actually changing the settings of the sensor itself. So it allows us to optimize your fuel mileage. And this computer is also patented. This particular device hooks into your O2 sensors, your coolant temp sensor, your IAT, which is your air intake, and your memory, so that once your ECU has learned the program, it has its own self-adaptability to mesh into the current car controls. And these wires go to certain sensors that we would like to manipulate so that we can maximize the potential of the sensors without the computer saying, hey, there's a virus there. So we're not changing any of your stock equipment, we're just enhancing what you already have, hence a vehicle modification or accessory. Unlike ripping out your original equipment and adding in something else. That's actually against the law. This allows us to stay within the parameters of the law because we're allowing the original equipment from the manufacturer to do its job. We're just maximizing its potential. This is the final part of the kit. Some vehicles that have a map sensor, we have to add what we call a map adjust, which is nothing more than some resistance and a couple transcenders and some oscillators and some other little gizmos. With a potentiometer allows us to set barometric pressures in your engine. And basically what that device will do is it will work with the optimizer hand in hand. We're going to tune that up today to be able to see what this car can do. Well, basically what it is we're trying to bust the patterns in the car computer in the way that it controls the fuel economy of your current vehicle. This particular device, which is nothing more than a timeout circuit board designed by myself and Mark Ringen, basically what it's going to do is it's going to allow us to slow down the ECU, speed up the O2s to operating temperature, as well as bring the optimizer online sooner, quicker, so that we can mesh the information together instead of beating each other up. So the codes aren't fighting each other, they're actually meshing together.
So in other words, simply put, it's interpolating information from the ECU and allowing the optimizer to do what it's supposed to do in timing and in connection and cooperation with the ECU.
That's correct. And the other thing that it's doing is allowing the O2 sensors to come online right away instead of them going through their final code sequence and kicking up a firewall. This is actually allowing us to keep that firewall in check, allow our new information to get into the ECU in a certain amount of minutes, and then it'll go back to stock parameters once our information is back into the computer. So it allows us to actually use the optimizer in our fuel cell setup. Alright, distilled water actually becomes your new fuel source. It will actually help displace the gasoline that you're no longer using. So if you run out of distilled water, it's just the same as running out of a container of gas. So you need to make sure your reservoir is completely full to the proper line of where the proper level that we showed you before. Because if you do not keep this full of water, it has no energy and you will burn out the system. Water level needs to be 1 inch from the top of this black cap, from the bottom of this bottom seam. We will see at least a 1 inch space. What we're doing right now is we're adjusting the map adjust, which in turn is manipulating the manifold absolute pressure sensor.
Right now the engine believes it's at a higher altitude, so it's taking fuel away and making the car run at a leaner setting, a little bit more efficiently.
It's starting to stick.
So the computer of the car actually relearns all the information and the parameters that we're putting into it. I mean, it takes a while, but it changes the stock settings to the settings we want it to see. You know, thereby leaning out the entire car, changing the ignition timing, and getting a more efficient engine so that we raise the gas mileage.
Basically, what's happening is between the time of switching between the 8.0 and the 7.7 is those longer intervals, which means the learning process is taking place.
So what we're looking at right now is the fuel trims of the car. And we've changed the fuel trims and the settings of the engine so that now the engine's using less fuel and it's setting up to our parameters.
What we're doing is we're adjusting our initial caustic levels to get the correct electrolyte process. Gasoline has a certain amount of properties that will actually help lubricate the engine as it combusts. So while you're using hydrogen, which is more of like a dry product, you have to overcompensate on the other end. So what we do in most of our tuning processes is we add a synthetic oil with a synthetic oil stabilizer. And what that will allow this to do is overcompensate on one end while taking away on the other. It will actually act as a balance in the lubrication system and allow the hydrogen to work without damaging the vehicle. I think one issue in the tuning process that's become very common is a lot of guys will go on the tech line and try to gain information. And a lot of what's given is just examples on how to. So you actually have to use your scan tool and your amp meter and your voltmeter in such a thorough process, because every car computer is different, every optimizer computer different, every map adjust is tuned different. So you can't go by what you hear. You actually have to do it, as we call, by the seat of your pants, and go through the thorough process in order to adjust all the values correctly. Most guys, they hear a number on the tech line or off the computer, and they'll set the car to it, and they won't get the maximum potential, end up tripping a code, and then they've just blown their tuning process out of the water. They don't get the proper results. They actually have to physically double-check, triple-check the process. And we do that here, and that's why we hit our numbers right on the head.
Well, basically what we're doing is we're making the cars run more efficient. We're doing what the car companies can do and should do. And I believe they all know this process. I mean, the hydrogen process has been around for about 200 years. We're just taking it and advancing it to the point where we're able to tie it into a modern fuel system and adapt the car, to make it more efficient. And
what's really interesting is, the misconception that people have is, oh, I have a giant fuel mileage device that could go as fast as I want, as long as I want, and drive like a maniac, and I'm going to save tons of money on my gasoline. And ultimately your foot is the ultimate fuel economy control, your driving habits. And with this particular device, all you have to do is feather the gas because it does increase the horsepower. It does pick up a little bit more intelligence on what your driving style is going to be. So we're just watching the scan tool, which is going to tell us about all our new parameters to come online with the vehicle's ECU, so we can check what changes we made and what are the constants, what are the variables that we're now applying to the vehicle. Run through an analysis of what operating systems came up and are allowing to monitor, and showing that everything is within reason of what the systems that we're looking to go for. We're going to check out for codes now, see if any codes. System passed, no faults detected, which means that our install in our tuning process is 100% on the money. Basically, in the orange test, what it is a drivability and mileage comparison. In your first driving test, your first orange test, you fill up the car completely, drive it 50 or 40 or 60 miles, doesn't matter as long as it's a decent number to be able to divide. You fill it up, drive, come back to the same gas pump, same gas station, and you fill up. Whatever your gallons is, you divide your mileage by the gallons, and that tells you how many miles per gallon you're getting. We do the same thing after the system's complete, and basically we've driven about 51, 52 miles, and that is your total gallons of fuel going into the car. And what we'll do is we'll divide the amount ran by that number, and that will tell you how many miles a gallon you're getting with this car. I didn't touch it. We try to go for the second click off. That's it. Second, because when you pump gas, you're only going for the second click off. Most guys do is only the first click off. What we do is when you come here to fill up, you fill up completely until you can't get any more in there to get the vapor lock out. When you return, you go by the second click off or third click off, because that's going to decipher your normal fill up conditions. And basically that was at the second click off for all intents and purposes. So that's it. We'll need the receipt from that. We're basically 595 minus 543. We went 52-mile trip. A 52-mile trip, we'll okay that. So we'll clear 52 miles divided by the amount of fuel that you used, which is 0.5 of a gallon. So divided by 0.5 of a gallon, because it won't allow you to go 8. There it is, 104 miles a gallon.
This DVD provides you with a broad overview of just how the system, when perfectly timed and tuned, provides between 50 and 120% fuel economies. For more information, contact the team at Extreme Energy Solutions at 973-209-3450 or write to them at extremeenergysolutions@yahoo.com.